distribution. Looks like I need to go start the Facebooks on my computer.
Let's see. Let me open this up.
Think I hear John Shambi.
I'm right here. Look at this. And I'm look, I got my there's the red box and I see what your point was here. Because I can always look at this one, and that's what happens. But I want to look up at that one.
There you go. Yeah, then you're looking at the audience.
Is this okay? Is this? I mean, my background is a dresser and some pictures, but that's about it.
It's the best you can do, and it's okay. We do what we can.
So now, what is this? What does you guys do? Tell me what this is all about, if you don't mind.
Well, TWiRT is a podcast that we've done for 15 years now. This is the 728th.
Wait a minute, you've been doing a podcast for 15 years?
Yeah.
I would interview you on that, because all these people who think they've just started doing stuff, you probably know all the pitfalls of a podcast.
Well, and the best part is I make a little money at it. The producer of the show, Suncast, he's online with us. You won't see him, but he may say something. If you say something funny, he'll play a Suncast play. What do you call that?
There we go. Now that's what I'm used to.
He's quick on the trigger. And then I've had a few different co-hosts over the years. Chris Tarr is my current co-host, but he had a transmitter emergency. He may not be here, so it may be just you and me.
Transmitter emergencies, don't we just love them?
Oh, and Suncast, I need to tell you, if Chris isn't here, then we're not going to talk about audio processing for Angry Audio. We're going to talk about the Rave console, and you know what to do for that. Yeah. So we'll give Chris another couple minutes. So we've had everybody from Bob Orban on to people from NAB to we've had Frank Foti on a few times, and just Mike Durow of the famous Durow meters. And I'm so sorry my meters don't work. It's because I stole a power supply from one of my boxes.
I can't see them, so you're good.
Okay.
What's that? You need a level? Okay.
No, more headroom. Tilt the camera up just a tad so the top of your head's up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, do you want to I want to cut off the bald spot. That's it. Anyway, yeah. Is that better? Okay, good.
That's better. Good. Yeah.
I forget this is true radio guy not knowing anything about camera work. But anyway, so this is interesting that you've done a podcast for 15 years, and people we're talking about podcasts just a couple of years ago. I've been that, you're a pioneer.
I'm not sure if our audience is bigger or smaller now than when we started. I don't know.
If you're making money, it might be bigger. So that's a good thing.
The advertising seems to be effective or effective enough. Whenever I go out to different conventions, NAB or Michigan broadcasters or Wisconsin anywhere I go, people come up to me and say, "Hey, we'll listen to your podcast every week. We'll listen or watch." So that's good, and we try to make it worthwhile for broadcast engineers to have a good time and learn something while doing it, and maybe put some new ideas in their heads.
That's wonderful. That's because they're let's face it, they're a forgotten group, and without them, there's nothing. So yeah.
So
is my voice level okay? Suncast, am I okay there?
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure it wasn't sounding like I was in a cave or anything.
Well, it's always best to have a pro mic, but on short notice, you may not have, a broadcast microphone. This is the same mic that Joe Cipriano uses.
Oh my!
Yeah. Tonight on The Simpsons.
I have a mic. The mic and this work the same. It seems I don't have much of a difference. So. Gotcha. Why didn't hook it up?
Well, it sounds better the closer you are to the laptop. So just don't lean back and talk to us from across the room, because that does
I
sound
can do
bad.
this. No, I'm not going to
That's
do
okay. You'll scare the small children.
that. That's going to happen anyway.
Well, let's see. I'm sorry. Let me get out here, and we have. I'm going to do a little program distribution as soon as I can find our podcast. All right.
This airs on the 26th, right? Is that what you said?
I'm sorry. What?
This airs on the 26th.
Yeah. Although we're going to go ahead and stream it now, but we'll stream it again at its regular broadcast time.
So this is live.
Yeah, it'll be live, and then we Suncast. I produce an intro for it, and Suncast tops and tails the thing, and then we publish it in its permanent form.
Well, I'm a Philadelphia Italian, so I'll watch my words.
Well, we don't guarantee it's safe for kids. We don't guarantee that. All right, so let's see here. I got that one part of that done. Let me see if we can share this to the TWiRT page. With that two. Here we go. Facebook. Good gosh. Hang on. Okay. And one more place to share it to. John, you're still there, right?
Totally.
Okay, good. All right. Hang on one sec. I got one more place to share this to. Okay. All right. I think that's done enough. Good. No, it is a minute after the top of the hour, and Chris has not answered, so we're going to go ahead and start. And if we see Chris show up, we will let him in, as Paul McCartney said. Let him in. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us live on the network. Glad you're here. This is the part of the show that gets cut off. So this is where the intro typically goes. It is closing in quickly on the end of the year. It's the 23rd. Yeah, it's 23rd. And I need to look and see. What do we have left for the year? Do we have another show? No. This is going to air on the 26th officially, and so this is our last show for this year. Okay, I think I knew that when I scheduled it, so I just forgot it. Well, yeah, next week will be at the regular time, but I will be in Spain. I've never been to Spain, but I kind of like what?
I like the music. I know where you're going with music.
That's right. Everybody knows where that's. You hear that phrase, I've never been to Spain, and the rest of it, 3 Dog Night, just pops in your head.
We'll finish it for you.
All right, so here we go with the start of this show. I'll do a countdown, and we will get going. Here we go with This Week in Radio Tech, episode 728 in 3, 2. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. So glad that you're here. We are here on Monday. We're doing the show, we're kind of pre-recording the show. If you're watching us live on the network or catching this on a Facebook or YouTube kind of replay of the live, that's fine. We will show this show on Thursday at the usual time, 4 p.m. Central, 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific time. And I think that must be about noon in Hawaii. So anyway, it's our last show of the year, and we wanted to kind of get it recorded before the hubbub of Christmas and the slothfulness that often follows Christmas Day. We wanted to get it in because this would air on the day after Christmas Day. So that's enough explanation. I'm Kirk. I'm in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, where it's a very bright and sunny but chilly December day. Chris Tarr was going to be here, and he may still show up, but he apparently had a little transmitter trouble this morning. I doubt it's the transmitter. It's probably something, like the power's out or who knows what. But anyway, Chris is going to join us if he can, but that's kind of doubtful. And that's okay because we have plenty to talk about. We have an interesting show for you today. I try to bring you mostly engineering folks, but sometimes we venture a little bit far afield in the radio industry to make sure we can understand what's going on with the different aspects of what we do for a living. And as engineers, I think it's a great idea. I think it's critical, actually, that we understand what the salespeople are doing and what the accounting office is up to and how they work. And of course, the talent, what they're doing and how we can best interface with them and help them. And the programming department. Where is programming going? And there's a gentleman that I met several years ago over at the Cumulus Nash facility here in Nashville. They built out several big studios, some years ago, and I met this guy, and I was really impressed. And he keeps impressing me because he keeps writing articles for Radio Inc. magazine and keeps his name out there in the radio industry. And he's a coach for radio talent, and he helps people with their radio programming. And I'm talking about a gentleman named John Shambi. John, welcome in. It's good to see you on TWiRT.
Good to see you, man. I did this reaction. I mean, the introduction. Just I don't know what to say. But it's good to be here. I really appreciate you having me here as a guest.
Well, it's good to see you, and I think we did meet at the Nash facility on the 2nd Avenue, didn't we, in Nashville?
Yes, the facility that has since been sold twice. So yeah.
What are they doing with that piece of property now? Because there were like 3 beautiful radio studios in there. What's happening there now? Do you know?
They sold it to a developer. I know you're shocked, a developer in Nashville. But they sold it to a developer, and as has been the case with most construction in this area, it's been hard to get the zoning. It's been hard to get then from there to get permits and all of that. So right now, the Nash campus is a city parking lot.
Wow!
Everything that moved out of there. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Everything that moved out of there, radio stations, where they're on the other side, across town. Over by Music Row. That's where things are.
Okay. So the facility, what they were doing in there, or the anything they needed the studios for, that's happening over at the Cumulus facility.
Well, it's not really happening, which will lead into some conversation that we have about radio in 2025. There's literally, just to be honest with you, there was a young lady named Elena Smith who did what was part of the night show that was syndicated. And they eliminated her show back a couple of weeks ago, and she did her last show last Friday. And when she walked out the door, she was the last employee officially of the Nash campus, as we know it. So they're doing, and I'll explain this as far as this is where radio is going in some respects, especially on the large company level. So
wow.
I'm open for questions. Whatever you need to know.
Wow. And we've never had Elena on the show before, but, and I'm sorry, I'm having a senior moment. Who was the gentleman that she worked with on the Nash Nights show some years ago?
John Parr.
John Parr. That's right. And John and Elena worked together in a studio. And of course, I got involved there because it was all Axia gear. Gary Klein was the corporate engineer for Cumulus, and he liked Axia gear. So the whole place was Axia. Yeah. And Sean Parr, one day I brought my son, Michael, who's at my house right now, and he's 14 now, but he was like, I don't know, he was like 5 or 6 years old at the time. Brought him by there, and Sean Parr had played patty cake with him and had the best time with my son.
That sounds like Sean. Yeah. So that's I think I met you with your son, and then you came back again. That's when I realized you were not just the guy I saw on TV. You were the guy that handled all of our equipment. And everybody what was in that building. Yeah. There was a lot of expensive equipment in that building.
Yeah, a lot of technology in there for doing all the shows that they did. Wow. And so Elena Smith, a lot of folks may know her as a talent. She's pretty, and she's very talented, and she knows the radio music industry, and she knows a lot of people. What a great hostess that she is. What do you know what all she's doing now?
Right now, she's just examining her options because that was it. her contract was up and she was done. So she's just examining her options. So there's nothing concrete at this point. I met with her 2 weeks ago, and that's kind of what I got out of it. She's just waiting to see what happens, and she's comfortable enough where she can. But it's one of those situations. This is what is radio these days. I mean, I can go right into what's happened in 2024 is probably the worst I've seen in this business in the past 10 years, and it's been pretty dismal before this. But a lot of companies, including iHeart, Odyssey, just let go of a bunch of people. They've all dropped a bunch of different shows and different personalities and consolidated things a lot. Where you have now you have, for example, you have a lady named Katie Dean who does middays on Odyssey, every Odyssey station, every Odyssey country station. She's doing middays. We used to have in the Nash campus, we used to have syndication that was on a bunch of different radio stations. But what Cumulus did, because they decided that they were going to split it up, and they have several syndicated shows that work out of markets that syndicate in various cities. And it saves money for them. iHeart, on the other side, has done a lot of their reduction in forces over the past year, and they've done a tremendous amount of them the past quarter. And you have people like Bobby Bones. There's a duo named Wayne D and Tay that they're doing a lot of their mornings and nights on most of the iHeart radio stations now.
I guess there's a question I want to ask, fundamental question about nationwide or regional personalities, because in the television business, this has, as long as I've been alive, this has pretty much been standard, where a nation or people around the water cooler at work or people around Zoom meetings now, we are familiar with national personalities, whether it was Jackie Gleason or Ed Sullivan or Ryan Seacrest today, who's on radio and TV. There's nothing wrong with a nationwide thing. A lot of people, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but a lot of people have in their head that radio needs to be local. It must be local for some reason. And there's a lot of bad local radio. There's a lot of good local radio too. And as part owner of 21 radio stations, my stations run a lot of things like John Tesh and Murphy, Sam and Jody and TJ and a lot of national shows. And I got to tell you, and I'll ask for your opinion here in a second. My business partner in my stations, Larry Fuss, he's really good at making those national shows just flow very well with lots of local identification with the show. And he's good at that. And you listen to it, and I mean, I know better, but I almost think they're at the radio station, even though I know better that they're not. So anyway, I'd kind of like to hear your opinion on what nationally syndicated shows mean to radio, and whether that's a good or a bad thing, or just a thing that's part of what radio is and maybe will be more of what radio is.
Well, there's a phrase that's been kicked around a lot, even more so over the past year or 2 years. It's live and local. Got to be live and local. And obviously, when I came here to Nashville 9 years ago, I came from a locally owned and operated cluster of radio stations that I oversaw. So I had that perspective, and when I came here, I had all of a sudden I'm over a network, and I always used to tell people the program directors at the radio stations that were the biggest pains in the butt to me were the ones that were constantly looking for something from our personalities to make their station sound better. So my opinion about live and local is, as long as you sound live and local, that does it for me. And I think that does it for any good radio station. Bobby Bones has success not just because he's syndicated, but because he's good and he's good at communicating. And I think that's the thing. There's a lot of good local radio out there, as you said, but there's a lot of bad local radio because they just want to be live and local. And I think you're better off in our day and age, if you're saving money, make sure you have the the talent that's on there to make your station still sound as it did when you had local talent. And I think that's important and has a lot to do with the people inside the radio station. And it starts on the engineering side, obviously, but it also goes into the programming side. You got to have one person. It's only one person in the building. That person's got to be focused on making sure the radio station sounds as live and local as possible. There's the phrase that we use sometimes called "set it and forget it" that a lot of program directors do, and that's exactly what they do. They run the show and they walk away, and they let the show do the work for them, and it sounds it. So that's happening more and more in this business, and I see 2025 becoming more of a radio. There's some good local, like I said, some really good local shows. But if companies are going local and not investing in their local talent, they're going to sound pretty poor. So if you have the money to invest in local talent, that's one thing. But if you don't, make sure you have some good talent that can sound live and local, and you have somebody in the building that can make it sound that way.
Well, we got a lot of topics to cover here, and eventually we'll probably work into how engineering can be a real boon to whatever the station's goals are, and how engineering, can also hinder whatever the station's goals are. We want to make sure we're not hindering, but in fact adding to the conversation and helping out. I want to dial back to my recollection of even in the early 1990s. I was engineering for a number of stations in Memphis and in the Memphis area. And that's when I started seeing a lot of program directors putting 3x5 cards in the control room, and the jocks had to read what was on the 3x5 card. And for many of the jocks, their own personality, they said, well, let your personality shine through, but read this card and don't do anything else. And I felt that was on the one hand, not a good thing. On the other hand, it let the program director really be in charge of everything that went out on the radio station. So maybe that was good if the PD was good. Can you speak to that era and how the mentality of that continues to move through to today, if it does?
I do a lot of listening to radio when I'm up in my little office upstairs, and I listen to a station a day usually. And there are days that will go by, depending, like I'll listen to country stations, and I'll listen to 3 or 4 in a row, and there may be a second or third day where I thought, did I listen to them yesterday? Because boy, they sure do sound like the station I listened to yesterday. And I realize that the talent is saying the same thing, they're playing the same songs, they're doing everything the same. From the 90s of what you're talking about, some radio stations have developed into that. They just are maintenance more than anything else. They get you through the songs, get you through the hour, and it has become a on one side, it's one of the things that sticks in the craw of a lot of programmers who don't believe. Many that we have these tiers of programming in different companies now, and it starts at the top. You have a head of programming of all formats. Then you have format captains. Then you might have regional VPs of programming. Then you have an operations manager in the building, and then you have a program director who's reporting to all those people, all the way up. And the objective is to keep your job. So when you're keeping your job, you're doing what they tell you to do. And they may be just as scared on the way up. And now you have people, and I'm saying it's happening. Then you have radio stations that sound bland. You have radio stations that have the sound that you talked about that started in the 90s. Why that started was because we started to research very much of our programming. We researched and we researched and we researched, and we got results back. And it was the fact that a lot of programmers and a lot of managers were interpreting the research literally and not really looking at the overall picture. And then, hearing, well, DJs talk too much. That was one of the big things. So then the best way to do that is just set them up. Okay. Rather than, why don't we make sure when they open their mouth, they're saying something. And it just depended on the individual in that respect. And a lot of programmers became those, I need to have control of this, or else if it gets out of hand, I'm going to get fired. So the best way to get control of it is I'm going to hand you this card, you read this. Or you've got your computer program that has all your liners on it, and you have everything scheduled on your music sheet. You run your liner here, this liner here, this liner here, this liner here. And use your personality as far as how you work around that, but you only need to do that in 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds. And I mean, it takes a good talent to do that, but it also takes a good talent to make something that may be 2 minutes long sound like it's 20 seconds. So
yeah.
it's just, and I think programmers have gotten lazy, not just lazy, but busy, because I mean, one of the talents I coach is a program director. He's the only person in the building, and he's got to handle what he does. He's on 5 other radio stations, and he doesn't even have time to do the music. He just lets the people above him do it because he just doesn't have time. And that's another issue too, because time has become an issue. Back then, there weren't all these tiers of programming. As consolidation came in the 90s, it was just research. And we got nervous about the research. Then as the companies got bigger, now all of a sudden you're a public company, shares, you've got to make sure your ratings cover a certain amount so that you make a certain amount so that you don't lose money. And it just trickles down to just play it safe. And that's kind of what's happening in a lot of radio stations.
We are talking to John Shambi. John is a talent coach. We're going to get a little bit more into that to find out, what John does as a talent coach. Man, I'll tell you what, there's been times I wish I could use coaching in my life. I could use coaching for my singing in choir. I could use coaching for my verbal delivery. There's a lot of things I could use coaching on, and I've never had that in my life. So I want to ask John about what he does for talent coaching. Also, coming up, we're going to ask John about what's his ideal station consulting situation. In other words, what given carte blanche, what can he do for a radio station to make it just amazing? And also I want to talk to John. I'm giving John some previews of our questions coming up about PPM, personal people meters, and seeing how that technology affects what stations do on the air. So we'll be That's all coming up. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Angry Audio. And Angry Audio makes this amazing little audio console. It's analog, and I'm all about the digital stuff, the AOIP. But if you've got a little studio where you need to just plug in some sources, put your jock in front of the console, and have them just be able to work that thing easily and efficiently, well, this is what you want. The Rave console from Angry Audio. We're going to show you some pictures of it right here. The Rave console. I was visiting Mike Dosh, Catfish as he's known by, the CEO, president, founder of Angry Audio, and he's had a lot of experience in designing audio consoles. He used to work at Pacific Recorders and Engineering, PR&E. And he also he was my boss actually at Telos Alliance, especially with the Axia consoles. And Mike has got his own company now, Angry Audio, designed this analog audio console. It's 8 faders, and then there's 2 more faders for the control room speaker volume and for the headphone volume. It's got a couple of buses plus a utility or telephone bus. It has XLR connectors for up to 4 mic inputs, but those same inputs can also be line level if you want to just bring in all line level sources. And the rest of them are line level. It, of course, has all the features you'd expect in a broadcast console, like tally lights. So it's got contact closure for tally lights and things like that. It does do mix minus for your phones, for your codecs. The audio specs are just absolutely fantastic. This is one thing that Mike Dosh is really good at, and that's designing super quiet, super great sounding, super flat EQ response audio circuitry. Check it out, the Rave console from Angry Audio. You can go to the website, angryaudio.com, and look at it there and see the features, but then you can purchase one from your favorite broadcast equipment dealer. And what a beautiful, this thing is, it's heavy. It sits on the console. It ain't going anywhere because it feels like a really good piece of broadcast gear. Thanks, Angry Audio, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Now, our show is also brought to you by Max Connect and Max Connect Group. Max Connect Group, these guys do a lot of things that we as engineers need and station owners need. You know, I think there's a shortage of engineers. I mean, people are just stretched really thin. Engineers are stretched really thin. Transmitter sites, studios, problems occur here, problems occur there. Chris Tarr right now is handling a problem with a transmitter. That's why he's not on the show right now. And if you're just overwhelmed, or hey, if you're a station owner or a manager and you can't find an engineer who's got the time or the expertise to take care of your needs, Max Connect Group is a full service broadcast technical firm. They have offices in Alabama, Maryland, Ohio, South Carolina, and Texas. And of course, you don't have to be in a state where they have an office. They'll travel. They are mostly traveling in the eastern U.S., but they will go anywhere. And they are really super good at correcting problems, maybe some long-term transmitter site problems that you've had. Maybe you need a studio rebuild. Maybe, and here's one thing that they are particularly good at that people seem to need. Maybe your remote control system for your transmitter site is just barely operational or not operational at all. I mean, do you have to drive to the transmitter site to push a button? You shouldn't have to do that. These guys at Max Connect are particularly good at setting up, wiring up, and giving you the tools you need to remote your transmitter site and keep total tabs on what's going on. Now, Max Connect Group, they also advertise their wireless offerings, their 4G LTE wireless offerings, and they have been improving that more and more, offering more and more services for their high-speed LTE internet service. Now they can actually integrate satellite delivery along with the 4G delivery. In other words, they can give you several layers of reliability for connecting to your transmitter site. They have great ideas for helping broadcasters. One reason why? They are broadcasters. Check them out. The Max Connect Group, go to maxconnect.com. I know it's spelled funny, MAXXKONNECT.com, and we'll have their link in the show notes if you want to check them out. All right, I'm Kirk Harnack. It's This Week in Radio Tech, our last show of 2024, episode 728. Our guest is John Shambi. John is a talent coach, and actually, I'd love to switch gears and go to that topic, John. I mentioned before the break that there are things in my life I'd like some coaching on. I never have, had anybody to pay for it for me or the money to do it myself. What, as a talent coach, what do you do with talent to make them better? How does that work?
Well, first of all, I was a radio program director for 45 years, and you work with talent for that long, you kind of learn the buttons to push. But I always tell people the time I really learned to coach talent was I wound up moving from the music side, and I programmed a talk radio station in Dallas, Texas in the 90s, KLIF. And I had, this is one of the last ones like this, I had 7 live local talk show hosts who all thought that everyone listened to their shows the entire 3 to 4 hours that they were on the air. And it was a very different group. And I was used to the time and what we used to call time and temp jocks in the 70s and 80s, where you just, those are the ones, they wanted the cards to read. But these guys were a whole different breed, and I learned how to motivate talent, how to get through to each individual, because they were individuals and they thought, again, that everybody listened to every word of theirs, and you had to help them through that. So that helped me. And then getting into, it was much easier to work morning shows after that, et cetera. Once I decided to go into business for myself, I've always been a mentor of people. I've always mentored people in various parts of a radio station. And I just thought maybe it's time to start coaching some talent. And I don't do a lot. I don't coach a lot. I'm selective. I maybe have 3 clients at a time, and that's about it. But what you basically work on is it's not me telling them what to do as much as letting them know how talented they are and having them bring that talent out and have them be comfortable enough to be able to get themselves to a position where they can move to a better job, or their ratings can get better, or they can get more money, or whatever it may be. It's just I kind of coach confidence more than anything else. That's kind of the idea. And we work together on it rather than me giving them a list of things to do. It's not a lot of that. It's very informal, and
Mm-hmm.
we may go through a show here or there, but it's more along the lines of what's on your mind. Tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what got you this past week, etc. So that's kind of how I coach talent. And I work with recording artists the same way. I help some labels teach recording artists about radio before they go out and visit radio. And you have to go through the same, building some confidence in them, letting them know that they're talented individuals. That's why you're working with them. So it's just that's kind of basically what I do as a talent.
I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea to go back and listen to your own show. And sometimes I have to go back and listen to one of these shows where where I'm the host, and sometimes I think I do a pretty good job, and sometimes I have just a number of bad habits that come through, a lot of ums and ers and ahs, or taking the long way around to get to a point. How do you talk to talent about analyzing what they've done to point something out that they need to improve, or as you say, pick out the good things and let them do more of that? How does that exercise work?
A lot of metaphors. For example, I had a couple of talent who as you described, had a hard time. Once they get to the point would be made and made and made and made and made. And my job was to let them know that, leave them wanting more, along that line. Teach them to know what, when you've said the one thing that you wanted to say, what's your point? Once you've made your point, move on. And then there are others who would just go on and on and on and on, and no point was made at all. And I always use my metaphor for them as, when you got in the car this morning, did you have a plan? And they said, well, yeah, my plan was to get here to work. I said, do you have a way to get here? Yeah. And you know where you're ending up? Yes. I said, well, and when do you know when you're ending up? When you get in a car? No, I know where I'm coming before I even get in the car. Okay. So when you're actually doing a break on the air, you should know where you're going to end up before you start. So I always tell them to work their way back. And I learned that through the talk show hosts, because I had talk show hosts who were very wordy, and tried to get through to them to, hey, learn to make your point. That's the idea. And to do that, you got to work your way back. You got to know what your point is to start off with, and then work your way back. It sounds so simple, but it's so amazing how many people don't do it, because they just don't understand that people are listening to you not as closely as you think they are. So you've got to
Mm-hmm.
break through that clutter. You got to break through all of that, and to do that, you have a clear point. Know where you're going to end up. Don't ramble on, because they'll get tired of it. They can make the decision that quick to change the station, or go to some other digital program, or whatever it may be.
Wow, coming up with a sense of that. That I think that's a very special skill, for a person to self recognize that the point needs to be made better or hard, and then we need to either move on or riff off that point without saying the point again. What comes after making the point. So wow, are there skills that a talk radio host would develop that a music-based disc jockey, a music-based host could also learn from, or vice versa? How do these things have any cross-functional capabilities?
What I just described is both personalities, is both formats, is know where you're going to end up. A talk show host has a little bit longer to do it, obviously, but it has to be entertaining on the way. So when you have figured out what your end point is, what your point's going to be, what are you going to dazzle them with to get up to that? What are going to be your important parts of the entertaining and informative parts that get you to that point? And that's what makes a talk show host really good. For a DJ, it's the same thing, but it's in shorter doses, and that's the only difference. But they're basically the same type of people. I mean, they're not very different as far as their mentality is concerned. So that's something that I wouldn't. I mean, the only thing I did differently with talk radio is obviously we were dealing with politics more than we would deal with on a regular radio station and air personalities on music stations. But I think the most important part for either one of them was to just understand that what's your point? What do you want the listener to walk away with? That's your that's your end point. That's where you arrive. So how are you going to get there? And then figure out how you're going to get there and get there with an interesting point of view all the way through. And that's always been something I've harped on since that happened when I was with KLIF.
Turning this conversation a bit toward what the technical setup can do to help or to hinder a talent's comfort level, a talent's creativity. I've always thought that the engineering accoutrement in the studio shouldn't get in the way. It should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. And right. I guess I'm stealing that phrase from somebody else. Can you talk to me a bit about maybe situations you've been in where the workflow, the technical arrangement didn't work well, and why didn't it? Just a quick example, I worked at a station in Memphis where the engineer was this kind of big guy. He was tall, he's gangly, and a good engineer, built quality rooms, but I guess he thought everybody else's arms were 4 feet long. And so the cart machines, back in cart machine days, the cart machines were at the disc jockey's 4 o'clock position and out of arm's reach. Huh? that didn't work.
That's my first. The first thing I would always look at is everything within an arm's reach for everybody, and then eyesight. Is everything within their peripheral their peripheral vision? If you turn your head this way or this way, is everything there? Which meaning your monitors should be right there in front of you, rather than monitors on the side. I don't care if it's even the meter readings or whatever. Everything should be in front, and that would include whether it's a Box Pro for calls, etc. But it's just something that I think everything needs to be within reach. And I can't remember the last place I worked at where everything wasn't in reach. I do remember one of the first stations I worked at. I was always doing this, and I was always doing this, and it was of course. It was when you're queuing rec. They had all the turntables on. I don't know why radio stations at one point. One of the turntables behind you on this side. And I finally went to a radio station where the turntables were right here within reach. And it made it so much easier because everything, and again, you're dealing, especially on the music side, every song is 3 minutes long, maybe 4 minutes at the most. And you got to have something ready for the next one. That was back in the day when you were hitting the buttons and everything was starting. Now you've got the computer going. But I think the other part of it is just everything, like I said, everything, even the clock, if it's a digital, straight ahead, everything's within your eyesight and your reach. If it's not, I think it's a poorly designed studio.
I wish he was still with us, of course, but my co-host for quite a few years was Chris Tobin, and Chris passed away about 4 years ago. But Chris was an engineer in New York, and he was an engineer at Winds, 1010 Winds, and Chris designed 2 identical control rooms, and he described them as being like fighter jet cockpits. That at that station. I don't think they had union people to push buttons. The host, and it was news. It wasn't talk shows per se. It was It was news delivery, but everything they needed was just right there in front of them. And it was tight. You sat there and you felt like you were in an F-15 cockpit with all the information right around you. You didn't have to extend your arm full length for anything. You could have bent elbow and touch everything.
Right. That to me is that most of them were like that. But I think that's, I mean, I will tell you that even the place I worked at here in Nashville, the Nash campus, the way the setup was, it was set up to have really nice equipment, good, but it wasn't functional in a sense of where everybody had to sit, and the goal is to look good for people coming in and seeing it, but for the people to work on it, it was not very. We had to make a lot of changes to this, just the where people sat and how they, where they could reach for equipment and all of that. It was done. It was done a little differently. I think it was done for the benefit of people seeing it rather than people working on it.
Well, sometimes that is part of the goal. And then there's competing strategies and competing goals when you design a studio. You can't put everything all in the same.
Right. Yeah. The engineer gets caught in the middle of that. So that's the other part. But I mean, I will tell you, the best engineers I've worked with were the ones who understood programming, but also were very staunch about how things were operated. So if if a personality was not fully vetted on a piece of equipment, I wasn't allowed to put them on the air. A couple stations I was at until they were, and they had to go through their motions with the engineer. And he would come to me and say, "Okay, I signed off on it," and that's how it worked. And I think I wasn't crazy about it, but I understood it, and I think that's how the two departments work together really well. And I have one engineer that we spent a lot of well, he happened to be a Philadelphia Flyers hockey fan, and so was I. So that was our connection. But he was also really good at. I found out that he was the type of person that was really good at troubleshooting. When he'd hear something, I would leave him. I'd learn to leave him alone, and rather than me walk behind him, did you get it fixed yet? Did you get it fixed yet? Because that drives every engineer crazy. I know that he had something working in his mind, and he would do this deductive reasoning that would break it down, and then I'd know that we'd be fixed at some point. And he'd come back to me and says, "All right, so we're taken care of. This is what I figured out," and it would be done. But we had that kind of confidence in each other, and that's a good thing to develop between a programmer and an engineer, because and you have some programmers who think they have the best ears in the business, and they really don't. I mean, we've been sitting with headphones in our, up to 10 for 20, 30 years. How can we have good ears? Okay, that's the first thing. So you got to depend. I mean, you got to depend on a program director, on an engineer, to tell you this is not sounding good enough. I can fix it so it sounds the way that's pleasing to the listener and makes you happy. And that's the kind of. But an engineer has to be. You have to depend on the engineer to be able to do that. A lot of program directors step in the middle of that, and I try to keep. I'll advise them to stay away from that. To just work with them, because that's your two best friends in the radio station should be the engineer and the accounting, and the person who works in accounting writes the checks. So that's it.
I have been to stations where it was critical that the engineer was in charge of the audio processing, but I've also been to stations. I was at a big New York radio station. It typically is number, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 in the ratings. At least back then it was. Well, it was a Spanish language station, Spanish Latin music, and I asked the engineer, because I went there to update the software in their Omnia 6s. This was quite some time ago. So there I was in the Empire State Building, in the room where that airplane crashed into the Empire State Building so many years ago, in that room. And so I asked, we updated the software, and I said, now, how do you adjust the Omnia 6? He says, I don't. So what do you mean you don't? He says, I don't know this music well enough. I don't know because there's a lot of trumpets, there's a lot of brass in their music, and so there's a lot of things that I don't really know about. I give the program director the keys to the Omnia 6. He adjusts it. It sounds great. So I think it can vary, from one place
there's no
to
question
another.
about that. There's no question about that. I would, if I'm an engineer and it's a Latin radio station, I would depend on the people who know that music more than anything else. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So we're talking to John Shambi. John is a longtime program director on a national basis, a local basis, and a coach. He understands so much about how to make good radio. We've got more to talk about, including how PPM, how that technology, how that affects programming. It used to maybe how diaries affect programming in smaller markets. Also, and we're still kind of working around studying how does an engineer help the goals of the radio station, or maybe accidentally hinder the goals of the radio station. I certainly have been exposed to both. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Broadcast Tools and this really cool product they have that we haven't talked about much. It's the Pro Mix One from Broadcast Tools. It's a single channel audio remote podcast mixer that's perfect for most remote broadcast or podcasting applications. It has a single microphone input channel. It has a balanced mono program output with defeatable soft clipper. It has a built-in USB codec for computer audio playback and recording. So yes, you can just connect this right up to your computer. It's kind of like an external sound card with all the, with the audio inputs and outputs built around it. It does have and something interesting. It will really help you with your intercom, with communicating on a back channel, if you will, back and forth with other people in the room or people back at the broadcast facility. So it's got full duplex talkback capability and an IFB audio input with level adjustment. It has a single quarter-inch stereo headphone output with independent volume, the IFB pan and program pan controls for custom headphone mixes. That's important. Hey, I want my IFB over here or over there, or just mixed in with the rest of the program. You can do all that. It has a remote channel control and status connector, and it can be combined with additional ProMix 1s, with the ProMix Hub 6 and standard Cat 5 cables. This is really important. They have this product called the ProMix Hub 6 that lets you hook several of these together, and you get the IFB and you get logic going between the different units that way, and they all can work together that way. This is really a smart system put together, of course, by Don Wingett at Broadcast Tools, the ProMix 1. You can check it out and buy them from Broadcasters General Store. BGS.cc is the website. I tell you, everything you need for broadcasting, you can get from Broadcasters General Store, including if you need to add television, need to add video to what you do. If you're running a little TV station, you can get lighting and it's all the things that you need for television from BGS. Love these people at Broadcasters General Store. They are smart. They are kind, and I've just had great experiences with BGS for many years now, including back in the day when I was the engineer for Sam Phillips in Memphis. Kurt, call them pretty girls at BGS and give me a good price. So we would do that. Their website, bgs.cc. Thanks a lot, Broadcaster General Store, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech, and thanks to Broadcast Tools for making such a huge array of things that you need to help get your job done as an engineer. All right, I'm Kirk Harnack. Chris Tarr is... it's so sad. He's having to solve a problem today. And I wish him well with that. And John Shambi is our guest today. We've taken the tack of talking about programming and coaching and how programming and engineering can work together, how they should, how sometimes it doesn't always go well. John, we wanted to talk a bit about PPM technology. Some people think it's good. Some people really hate it. And it certainly can be maladjusted. So there's a lot of aspects to PPM. What can you tell us about your job and what you do and your consulting as it relates to PPM?
Well, first of all, PPM it's now going to be a wearable.
Oh.
that will go from what looked like a what pager, and now it's become a wearable, so that they can wear it around their wrist. And it's still just it works with the signal when someone walks into a building or gets into a car or whatever, and a radio station is playing. Um, the I mean, I was a program director when PPM first started. I was in a PPM market, and how things changed for us. It changed the way we broke we did the commercial breaks, and it's still given. It's still in that mode now. If you listen to any radio station, I will guarantee you, most radio stations will break somewhere between 13 and 17 after the hour, and somewhere between 42 and 46 or 47 in the hour. They call it a bow tie. And because it determined that the longer the radio station was playing music, the longer people would listen to the station. At least that's they were seeing from the PPM technology. And then there was a point when PPM first came in. It was in for about 2 to 3 years when we were discovering that there wasn't some of our signal was not getting processed properly, not encoded properly, and because it was too low for it to encode. So someone invented a program or a piece of equipment called the Voltaire, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And the Voltaire was supposed to kick that volume up so that the PPM would pick it up. And stations that were getting Voltaire were seeing bumps in the ratings, et cetera. And everybody got excited about that. Once PPM settled in, it is part of what we do. It's part of it's the report card. It's unfortunate that it is. I will tell you that it has a tremendous amount of flaws. I mean, I saw it myself here in Nashville with a local radio station. I programmed a local radio station too on top of the Nash campus, where I saw the radio station. We used to get a report called a CPR report every month. Radio stations still get that, where Nielsen, who handles the PPM technology, they will send out to radio stations a full breakout of who has a meter, how old they are, where they're from, and how long they've been listening. And you get your top 25 listeners in that category, and you'll see your top 25 areas and all of that. And this was the first month we were getting it. We had our radio station was in the middle of the pack. All of a sudden, we were not in the middle of the pack. We were number 2. And I didn't do anything different. I mean, programming wise, we just programmed the radio station every day like we normally programmed it. And so my first thought was, let me go check out what's going on in this CPR report. And I found, you're going to love this, we were the number 2 radio station in the market at that time by a monthly report. And I went to look, and I found 2 people, one age 83 and one age 85, that had been listening for 1,500 quarter hours per week each.
Oh my goodness!
So compute that down to hours. You'll see that's a long time. Jokingly, we thought, well, maybe these people are dead and the radio's on, and they have meters. We weren't sure, but it moved the needle so much. It moved me from 7th to 2nd with just 2 people. And so I started to be very skeptical about portable people meters. And then they went away. Of course, our ratings dropped when they went away. But then all of a sudden, in our key demographic, I see in 25 to 54 adults, which is the key demographic, we soared to number 1. And we're normally a number 4 or 5, maybe 6 radio station. I thought, okay, I'm going to go back and look. We had a young lady, age 27, who listened for 2,500 quarter hours a week. And that was it. So people are seeing that. And as we've seen more of that, it's been decided that portable people meters, they're going to measure, listening, and you're going to have these kind of flaws. Be careful. Program your radio station as if there's no ratings. Just do it the right way, the way you think is the right way. Don't let the ratings influence you. And it takes a little bit of time for that. And the difference between that, now you have basically this is a matter of exposure, the ppm, because I could have one of these wearables on, and with my daughter, I walk into a store that's playing hip hop music, and they've got this old guy, now they got him listening to a hip hop radio station for 20 minutes, okay, because I walked into a place that was playing this radio station. Or my daughter gets in the car and she turns on a rock station or something like that. Now you got me listening to the rock station. So it measures exposure, not actual listening. The diary on the other side measures recall, because you're writing down what you hear, and that has its own issues. The thing with the diary is that they have different people every week, for a 12-week period. A different group of people. It's less amount. It's usually 400 or 500 people in a market. Whereas with the ppm, you have about, depending on the market size, like Nashville, there are probably about 2,000 people that have meters, holding on to meters, and they're allowed to hold them for 2 years. The average is about 9 months. And what happens is, just like even with a diary, they change. They always change. But with a meter, if someone's like this lady that was 25 to 54 that was listening for 2,500 quarter hours, she did that for 3 months. And you know what happened after that? She turned her meter in. She was done. And then person who took her place, I don't know if they were a country listener or not. They may not have been. They were in the same age group, but so that's what happens with the portable people meter. Technically, the thing that we have to make sure of is that it's loud enough to be encoded. That's all. I think that's where the Voltaire came in. And then, ironically, Nielsen had they had developed their own piece of equipment that does it. So Voltaire went away, and Nielsen had their own piece of equipment. But it's still that's the main. If engineering has anything to do with the ppm ratings, that's it. Is just make sure the station is loud enough to be encoded, and just make sure it's encoding. I had an incident in Virginia Beach where I was working, where we lost our antenna on our transmitter. The antenna just went out. It was gone, and our ownership had refused to budget for one to replace. So it was going to go, and it went, and that means we were off the air for a certain period of time. And our engineer decided to just rig us to be on our AC station's tower, about maybe 2-3 miles away. I get a phone call from Nielsen about 3 weeks after that, saying, "I think we have a problem here. We're not seeing you in the ratings." And there's something wrong, because you're usually showing up very well. And we were, when we were rigged under that other radio station, we went from, 20,000 watts to 1,500. So, but still we were supposedly covered, because I could hear the radio station at home. So I figured we're okay. But none of the ppm meters were picking it up. We had 3 weeks of zeros. We didn't even know. So, and that killed us for about 2 months. Again, we didn't know, because Nielsen didn't have the wherewithal to even call us after the first week and say, "Hey, you might have a problem here." And they didn't. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's something that ratings are an important part of, obviously, the equation, because that's the report card, and that's where we make some of our advertising money. Not as much as we used to, because a lot of radio stations go out and sell locally. But the fact is that that's where PPM, can run into trouble with us. That's where I really need, my engineer was learning just as much as I was. He didn't know anything about it. And as we got closer to when I got here, we had engineers who knew more about PPM, and they made sure that the signal was strong enough to be picked up everywhere. And that's the most important part of PPM from an engineering standpoint.
Yeah. Wow. I wish they had a different technology. I'm privy to a little bit of knowledge that they have a patent on a different technology, but that means nobody else can roll that technology out. So,
well, that's just shocking to me.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. We're talking to John Shambi. John is a talent coach, program director, and he's got a lot of ideas. We're gonna get one more quick a commercial message from one of our sponsors. When we come back, John, we're going to have just about 5 minutes or so, and maybe you can give us a little look at what you think is ahead. We really hadn't even hardly got to that. What programming things may be ahead for us. The hour's gone. And at my own stations, the ones that Larry Fuss and I and some others own, we've been doing a lot of syndicated programming, but we've been doing it really well. And we do a lot of voice tracking too. And we do a few shifts with AI voice tracking. And I'm not a huge fan, but I'm not negative on it either. When I mentioned it to Larry, I said, Larry, it's the voice sounds like NPR underwriting announcements when there ought to be a little bit of excitement in the voice. And Larry always points out, well, Kirk, it's better than nothing. And it's better than some of the talent we can afford. So you're entirely right about that. It's not bad. Anyway, that's coming up with John here in just a minute. This Week in Radio Tech, I'm Kirk Harnack, and our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcast Bionics. They make something that makes our job as engineers easier. And this is the future. This is where things are going. And it's the Broadcast Bionics virtual rack. Let's show this video with Dan McQuillan explaining something about virtual rack.
Now, we're looking at the virtual rack here, which is something we've chatted about before. Tell us what's new.
Yeah, so we showed this for the first time at IBC, but it's the first time at NAB, and also more importantly, the first time it's now commercially available. So shipping now with some available containers from Telos. So we have software mixing, software audio processing, and software talk show available commercially. But first time showing it here, and again, as with IBC, getting a fantastic reaction from those who've been frustrated by or curious about or struggling with this idea of containers, managing that without the complexity of Linux and command line and all that sort of stuff, and really building a simple, scalable, flexible way of building your broadcast infrastructure.
Fantastic. And something to my right here is the table that we spoke about last NAB, I think.
That's right. So that we showed at last NAB, but again, like Virtual Rack, that's now also available and shipping from the show. And again, had a really good reaction from those people, with that challenge of looking to produce content, but maybe not from a traditional studio space, a more conversational kind of content, very suitable for speech-based, podcasting, or non-traditional kind of formats. And again, I think this show, we've really seen people understand the philosophy behind that it's not about a cheaper studio, it's about a different space for generating a different and a new kind of content.
The virtual rack is the easy way to implement virtualized broadcast infrastructure into your broadcast facility. So you don't have to deal with selecting your own server. You don't have to deal with trying to install Linux or paying a third party to get that installed and get the Docker containers all installed for you. It happens just about automatically. You plug the server in, you browse into it, you pick out the functions you want, like a phone system or an audio console, or audio processing, and it installs correctly, and you give it the IP addresses that you want, and you're good to go. You can get all these things done with Virtual Rack. Broadcast Bionic is the brainchild behind making this easy, this virtualized broadcast infrastructure that so many stations are now either doing or seriously looking at or have already done in a big way. Thanks a lot to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. You can get to their website at bionics.co.uk. We'll have a link in the show notes. All right, John Shambi, we just got 5 more minutes together here, and I promised you, me, and our listeners, what's ahead? What changes do you think are going to be occurring in the broadcast field? And I know we're talking about stations from small to big, but if you can just kind of give us a big happy middle of where you think some things are going, that'd be helpful.
Well, I think AI is going to become, or is becoming, and will be in 2025, an integral part of a radio station's staff, so to speak. And I'm not talking about the personalities per se, but I'm talking about whether it's writing copy, producing commercials, producing promos, things of that nature. An added production director might be AI, but I think AI is becoming more and more an integral part of a radio station, and has to be, because of all the people doing multiple jobs. It helps replace the people that have already been let go. That and it does a very good job at it. And it also depends on how, again, it's garbage in, garbage out. That's another thing. But from an engineering standpoint, I think that's what you really have to. I would suggest making sure to learn as much as you can about AI, and be ready with your staff to show them how it works and show them the good and bad parts of it. I think what else is coming for 2025 on the radio side is the fact that it's not just what's coming out of your terrestrial speakers anymore. Your stream has to sound top notch, and I mean top notch. I think there's more listening on streaming than ever, and it's becoming. And especially if we're still trying to attract a younger audience in some respects, and even the older audience, they're going to listen on streaming. Because if I get in my car now, I have Apple CarPlay, and for me to find my radio station on Apple CarPlay, I could tell Siri to go find it, and she's finding the stream to play for me. That's it. I listen to radio stations all over the country in my car, and I'm listening to their streams, and I hear some very, very pitiful streams. The technical quality of streams are bad. And I think that's something, and we're going up against Spotify. We're going up against some Joe Rogan podcasts and things of that nature. So we better be at the top of our game in that area. I would also, most radio stations have to learn to develop outside of the terrestrial signal. Podcasts being one thing. There's more of those coming in from different radio stations, from morning shows, from the various personalities, et cetera. But that's something. Going to see more radio stations getting more involved in all kinds of different what they present, because they're going to have to compete, and that's the best way to compete. And I think also from a target demographic standpoint, we have to figure out a way to attract the younger audience without forsaking the older audience. And as my daughter so eloquently told me one time, is that the only way radio is going to become something in our minds is if it's entertaining. They can get their music wherever they want, and that's what we have to understand on from a radio standpoint. It's no longer the music medium that it used to be. It still is in some way, but it's more a talent, personality medium more than anything else, and it has to be addressed that way. And again, that creates, from an engineering standpoint, comfort for the talent as much as possible, so that they're comfortable doing what they're doing, and they can be who they are without having to worry about whether the equipment works or not, something along that line. If I look at, we talked about the live and local aspect, I think you're going to see more regional shows becoming, like a show in Atlanta will be the morning show for Augusta, Macon, Savannah, whatever stations those companies own. On a regional basis, you're going to see a little more of that, because they can't afford to have all these personalities. I'm looking for the company, and I'm going to change the subject. Looking for the company that has the guts to say, we don't need all these top tiers of programming anymore. Why don't we move it down a bit, and then we can create a little more of a staff inside of it rather than outside. Because there's so many people overseeing things that we don't have enough people that really are doing the job inside. And I'd see a couple of radio companies leaning in that direction, but most of them are leaning in the other direction. So it's still going to be about how efficiently you run your operation. But AI, I'm telling you, that's the number one thing for 2025, in my opinion. That's it. It's how you adjust to that, and how you use it, and how you don't use it.
It's I'm thinking of when you say AI, and you already said you're not talking necessarily about just on air speech voice talent.
Well, matter of fact, that's the last thing I'm talking about. It could be
last thing you're talking about.
I have a friend that works for a company called Super Hi-Fi, who used to be a radio programmer. And what he's doing right now for one specific company is he's creating a music rotation, that will just basically be fit into the radio station, and will play the music. Not necessarily, it's not set up 24 hours in advance. It's set up to think what to play next. Not necessarily. And you teach it how to think. There are some radio stations now that really have as a production aid. They have a production voice that's an AI voice, or they have production, writing, etc., writing promotional announcements, all of that. I mean, I got to tell you, when I write a column, I will write the column. I will take it into to Gemini, which is Google's their version of AI, and I'll say, tell me what's good and bad about this. It'll come back with a few minor changes that I'll go back and change some more, but it helps. It's an assistance. It's a way to make something better. And as long as we think along that line about AI, I think we won't have any problem. But I think that's going to be a major part of our discussions over the next year when it comes to radio. The involvement of AI and how we involve it and how much we involve it. My opinion is that you're going to see a lot more of it and hear a lot more of it as we get into the year.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I think that's a great, for people who aren't into using much AI yet, having it review work that you've done, especially textual work, obviously, having it review that can be super helpful. John, we're out of time, and I appreciate so much you taking time on this Monday to stream the show and record it. We're going to play. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I hope I wasn't too long-winded.
No, you're perfect. Perfect. I'd love to spend another hour with you, but lunch calls. So I'm going to go.
You're a true engineer. Lunch calls.
That's right.
No, but I mean,
John Shambi, hey, if you said you stay pretty busy and you have limited clients, but if people want to reach you, where would they do that?
Jay Shambi, JSHOMBY at countriesradiocoach.com. My website is countriesradiocoach.com. That's COUNTRYSCOACH.com. And that's the best.
And I think I had a look at the website earlier. Good look. Good. Yeah, I'm on it right now. Good looking website, and a lot of success there. And anyway, I wish you more success in coaching people. So we really have the best radio presentations that we can possibly have on the air. Maybe there's fewer talent on the air now than than before, but we'd love for that talent to be really good.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your help there. John Shambi's been our guest. I'm Kirk Harnack, and wishing you a very Merry Christmas, and hope 2024 wasn't too bad for you. Hope it was good, actually, and looking forward to a better 2025. A lot of things are going to happen, I think, so let's just be in the game and be in the running. Big thanks to Suncast, our producer, for producing today's show. Really appreciate you, Suncast, and we will see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.